Hi, and welcome to the Sci-Fi and Sunshine podcast. Okay, this is Bria at the Sci-Fi and Sunshine podcast. I'm a running mom and a speculative fiction author here with Dan Daetz. I am so excited to introduce you all to sci-fi author Dan, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Dan, to introduce yourself with an introduction, what you want to let people watching know about you in this first few minutes.
Oh, so good to be with you, Bria. And I like to describe myself as a test pilot with a writing problem.
Oh, I love
Uh,
that.
so my background was over 20 years serving in the Air Force. Great time, great friendships, and flying lots of different things. But I've also always been a fan of especially sci-fi, but other spec fiction as well. And so um, really just started to get inspired to get into the writing side of it. And so it's been a fun journey, and I've appreciated being on the journey with you.
Oh yeah, same. And I'll mention we met last year, about a year ago. We met in July at the Realm Makers Writers Conference, and I've talked about this conference before on the podcast. I love it. It's sci-fi, fantasy, horror, any speculative fiction authors convene at this conference, and it's specifically for Christian authors. Your book does not have to be explicitly Christian, but they put on this conference for Christian authors and writers, and it's specifically the spec fic, and it's amazing. It's really fun. I was slightly devastated that I didn't get to go just a week ago, basically. We're just past the past weekend was the conference. You got to go. And I before I ask you a couple Realm Makers questions, like bumping my mic here, I have to say Dan, I kind of think of you as a twin brother because when I first met you, we were lined up for the costume night, the dress up night. I was Princess Leia from A New Hope. You were X-Wing fighter pilot Luke from A New Hope. And it was just, oh, hey, we're buddies. Like, nice to
Uh,
meet you.
It was so
So,
awesome.
yeah, it was great to get photos. And there was tons of people dressed up like Jedi and Han and other Leia's. There were just lots of Star Wars, lots of lightsabers. It was so fun, and amongst all kinds of pop culture icons that people were dressed as. So, do you mind sharing just a little bit about this year, this Realm Makers? I hear you were a Jedi this time.
Yes, I was Obi-Wan, or as I describe
Okay,
myself, I was a failed youth pastor for Jedi.
that's
It didn't
funny.
work out so well, right? Actually, I have photographic evidence that Star Wars people and Star Trek people can get along. A
Yeah,
few
yeah,
pictures of us together in our different cosplays. Um, Overall, man, the conference was superb. And it's such a fun environment because this is not a dog eat dog environment where
yeah,
people are competing to who gets to be the best author. It's
yeah.
such a mutually supportive environment, all ages, and of course, across the whole spec fit universe. So, no, fantastic time. Some great speakers. I got to be tutored by some excellent sci-fi writers in the Christian sphere. Kathy Tyers, Ronnie Kendig were a couple of
Mhm.
the teachers. They've written some space opera stuff that goes
Yeah.
back to a series called Firebird for Kathy Tyers, which is well known. And then Ronnie Kendig has a series. I can never pronounce the Dressonian whatever saga, but Brand of Light is the first book in her series,
Okay.
and more space opera, but just fantastic people, very supportive environment, and just a whole lot of fun.
Good, awesome. And did you run into any other Star Wars fans dressed up? What kind of costumes were we seeing this year?
Oh yeah, I had a flashback, Bria, because one of the authors, whom you know, first name Bradley, he was
Yeah,
dressed up as Han Solo, and his wife was
nice.
dressed up as Princess Leia.
Oh, I
So
love it. There, Leia was represented this year.
Leia was indeed represented. So even though you weren't there in your typical Leia costume, yeah, others were, and there were some other Jedis out there. So yes, it was a whole lot of fun. And I'm just going to give props while we're on this to my wife because she is not a cosplayer, nor is she a fiction reader, but
Mhm.
she is an excellent seamstress. And she actually helped put together my whole Obi-Wan costume. I mean, she did the whole thing from scratch, with the exception of the boots and the belt or something. So yes,
That's
I've got a
awesome.
very supportive team here at home that allows me to play.
I love it. That's a very wonderful skill that your wife has. So let's move into when we first met, it wasn't too long after that, I had you on the Sci-Fi Hour at Joy on Paper Radio. That was the first time I got the opportunity to interview you. And we were talking at the time, this debut sci-fi novel that's coming out. It was, we're talking almost a year ago. You had a short story that was essentially like a lead-in. Talk a little bit about that short story. It was such a fun read.
Yeah, so it's a little play on words like authors like to do, and it's
Hmm.
called The Storm of the Eye. And
Right.
it's about a pilot who, on his birthday, who thinks he's going to be on leave enjoying his birthday day off, but gets called into combat against these rebels who live in kind of the Shadow Canyon lands. And he's 25 years old. It's his 25th birthday. And so he goes out, and I won't spoil too much of the story except to say there's a lot of flying action and there's a twist at the end. Um, but it
Hmm.
really gives you a little bit of insight into the young man who will then become the older man, not an
Yeah.
old man, but an older guy.
Older. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
in the full-blown novel, which you've read and which is coming out first on Kickstarter, but then later on retail. And so I really wanted to even myself explore how did this guy sort of start to think the way that he did, that might have led him into the role that he plays in the full-blown book.
Okay, so when you started writing this short story, was it, oh, I'm just going to write a short story and then wait a minute, there might be more? Or was it the reverse? Okay, I've got this novel. I want a short story to introduce this guy. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the novel was drafted. Now, for all of us who write these things, it takes a while to go from first draft to polished. But in between that process, it was like I, even as an author, want to explore this guy's origin story
Mm,
a little
hmm.
bit deeper. And
Hmm.
rather than put all that backstory in a book, why don't we do an event, right? Just kind of get a little snapshot through a short story. Um, I'll also say, as an author, for people who read both, novels and short stories,
Hmm.
there's a little different skill set. Often a
Yes.
novel, you tie a bow at
Yeah,
the end, right? And everyone's happy, or maybe not
true.
happy, but you've tied the bow. A short
Hmm.
story, you don't necessarily tie all the bow together at the end, and that could be
Yeah.
very intentional. So it was also being able to, bring out a little different type of story,
Hmm.
um, and really zeroed in on really just a couple of characters that show up in the book. Yeah.
Okay, yes. And let's talk Kickstarter. So the novel is coming out. It's called The Whole Man. When do the Kickstarter folks get to experience this book?
So I'm not sure when this podcast will be on the web.
Probably in 1 week. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, you'll need to get on the Kickstarter now.
Mhm.
The official end date is the 31st of July, although I've
Mhm.
allowed some little bit of grace at the end for people who kind of jump into the party late.
Okay, okay.
Um, and like any Kickstarter, I want to make this real high value for anyone who decides to jump in. And I guess for latecomers, the one benefit is you get to see all of these what are called stretch goals, that we
Yeah,
accumulate over time. And so far, we've accumulated, I think, six or seven
I've seen
already.
that.
Yeah, on the
Yes.
Kickstarter. And maybe by the time your listeners get this, there will be even more.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so you'll get to see, right, what the value is you're going to get because
Yeah.
these are not retail prices, but they're also not the same as the sort of books you'd get on retail, meaning color interiors and
Hmm.
some other bonus stuff that you is not going to be ever on Amazon. So that's the fun part of doing a Kickstarter, and it's honestly my first time not supporting one, but doing one. So there's been a whole
Okay,
different learning
yeah.
curve in that for any of people who are trying to do a Kickstarter. There is a learning curve, so learn from your peers and experiment.
So tell us briefly about for example, you have a version for Kickstarter where they're getting the color. Who did those illustrations? How did you decide some of these rewards?
Yeah. Um, so I reached out. I did not want to have AI do illustrations, right? Obviously,
Hmm.
I don't use AI for writing. I mean, other than
Hmm.
like a Google search and research and stuff like that. So I reached out through either freelancers or people I know. I reached out to a very excellent cover designer who has done traditional covers in the spec fiction world and has written spec fiction herself. And Emily's my cover designer, and she's awesome. We actually
Is
saw
it
each
Emily
other.
Haney?
It's Emily Haney.
Yes,
Yes.
I met her at Realm Makers. I don't know if it was last year. It could have been the year before. Whenever she was Captain Picard.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that might have been last year as well.
And and just to give props to her, she's such a good artist that she's in demand. And when I brought this
Yeah.
up to her, she goes, I've got it pretty full, already sort of almost booked for the year. But you
Yeah.
know what? I really love sci-fi. I don't get to do, I do more fantasy covers than sci-fi. I really
I've
love sci-fi.
seen so she did the cover for another Realmy, Jim Doherty, who has a middle grade fantasy. And I've seen several of her covers from Realmy. So yeah, she is in high demand for sure. So that's
Yeah.
awesome that you got her.
Well, and I love collaborating. The writing itself can be kind of a very solitary business, but I love the
Yeah.
whole collaborative nature. I really believe that the value is in community. I mean, Realm
Hmm.
Makers is one such community, but you may have writers groups, or if you're a reader, you have readers groups and to talk about books that you read. I think it's a really
Hmm.
important part of our experience.
Oh, absolutely. And so did she also do the illustrations inside the book, or is that something different than I'm thinking of?
Yeah, well, she did not because I wanted to, she has a really busy plate, so I wanted to keep her
Okay.
focused on covers. She's helping me with some bookmarks, which is also part of the extra swag on the
Yes,
Kickstarter
yes.
that people can get some really awesome looking bookmarks and stuff. Um, and for the other illustrations, I reached out for some other freelancers
Mhm.
with a vision of what I wanted. I'm
Yeah.
getting like some maps made and some other things like that,
Yeah, that's
which is
always
always
I
fun.
always think maps are fun. They're
Yeah.
fun.
And, as a pilot, I had to have a
Mhm.
picture of the airplane somewhere in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, being a guy who actually studied how airplanes fly and all that kind of jazz, it was fun to kind of to go from a sketch out of these are the kind of airplanes that they would fly around on this planet. They're not super high technology level. It's almost like humanity has gone to a new place and decided all that technology was not maybe the best thing for us. So let's
Hmm.
get to a more simplistic baseline technology. Like nobody walks around with cell phones. Boy, I remember those days, but nobody walks around with cell phones. There's not high technology, and this aircraft is not like your typical spacey, X-wing fighter with anti-gravity and stuff. It's a pretty almost like 20th century, but in this futuristic world. So it's a little bit
Okay,
of that
yeah.
dichotomy. If you're familiar
Yeah.
with like Dune, you know,
Uh-huh.
Dune takes place in this grand universe and yet their technology, yeah, they have computers, but not many. It's
Hmm.
kind of like a simplified version of tech, which can be a little different, right, in terms of sci-fi universe.
Yes, absolutely. And before we switch over from the Kickstarter, how did you find the whole process? Like now that the stretch goals are happening, was it this, oh gosh, I have no idea what's going to happen? Did you have a bunch of people ahead of time going, yeah, I'm going to support this? Or was it kind of a big surprise once these goals were met and these signposts were met?
Um, yeah, it was a bit of a who knows how this is going to turn out,
Hmm.
right? And I will say one of the first things I did is I reached out to a few people I know and said, "Would you just please pray over this project?" All right, I'm a kind of
Mm,
guy. I'm a praying person. I believe in that prayer is important in
mhm.
life, and so for anything we're doing, whether it's writing or just being a parent or other things, this is
Mhm.
something I want to invite into the experience. So I have some very gracious people who every single day, or however they do it, have been supporting this. And so I don't think it's just about, how much money does a Kickstarter raise. I think it's also an opportunity to build community, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
around not just me as a creator, but others who are like the other designers who are investing art and stuff into this. So that
Yeah.
people feel like they're part of something, right? They're not just consuming something, they're actually part of it.
I love that. Yeah. And then so the product itself, let's say we've mentioned how those of you who are watching can jump on the Kickstarter even now. For those who don't manage to get on the Kickstarter, what is the launch date? Do you have a date for the regular retail launch?
I don't have a firm date, but right now I'm targeting very early in 2026.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So th this really is quite the benefit if you jump on the Kickstarter now, because
Yes,
you'll get the
early
book
access.
now. And so you're getting, in my opinion, you're getting your money's worth. So let's get into it. Let's get into the book itself. We've got what I would call a rip-roaring rocket ride. It's full of heart and it's full of adrenaline. And that's probably going to be close to a blurb that I would give you. But oh man, it is intense. It's so fun. And then it's also there's just some of the character dynamics. There's a lot of conflict that is so relatable. The father-daughter, I am obviously a daughter of some father, right? So I have a father and I have a relationship with him, and I actually have a great relationship with him. And so I couldn't help but think of some of those things as our two main characters, Bard and Alana, his daughter, are just, I mean, talk about one thing to the next, like one crisis to the next. There's a lot going on in this book. So tell us, if you want to give us like the broad overview or even just some key points about the novel. As I mentioned, it's called The Whole Man, and maybe start there. Tell us why that title.
Yes. Yeah, and the premise is fairly dark, although the story doesn't stay dark. So the
True.
premise is the
I
guy,
can attest to that. Yeah.
yes, the premise is a guy who he's got this ugliest job in the universe because his job is to feed human sacrifices into a black hole.
Yeah.
And just think about, the perspective of an executioner who has that kind of job.
Yeah.
His thought process, and this isn't really a spoiler, is that okay, if I do this job, it'll clear my slate because he's got some
Hmm.
backstory, and then I'll be able to reunite with my family. Right? That's
Hmm.
sort of the bargain I've made. It's almost like a bargain with the devil. Do this job, and then I can get back to my family.
Right.
Um, and maybe rebuild a life, with respect. And so that's caused him to be away from his family for years, and particularly his daughter. And so that's like the premise. It's a story about reunion and about redemption,
Hmm.
above all else, which are some very core things that we crave as people,
Yeah.
right? Like the worst things that we've done in life, do we want them to define us, or do we want to have another chance?
Hmm.
To write a different story. And
Yeah.
so that's the core of his message, but also that fraught reunion thing. Having been a
Yeah.
military guy and go away and you come back and you go away and you come back, there's always a period of adjustment for
I
families
imagine.
with any
Yes.
of that reunion, and it's not nearly as drastic as what is depicted in this book in most cases.
Hmm.
But there is the wondering about, hey, what's going on and what's going on at home. And so I think this kind of takes it to a new level in terms of
Yeah.
how do we rebuild after that separation and a lot of ugly things that have happened along the way.
Yeah. And so to mention, I'll bring up the context, the bigger, greater world context. This is not Earth. So there is some of the kind of general setting is this other planet. And there's not what I actually appreciate this. There's not a lot of explanation. There's like little tidbits that are dropped in very effectively to explain without info dumping, to explain that yes, humanity ended up having to basically evacuate Earth because of problems. And I kind of like that you leave a little bit to the imagination. And so they find this other planet, but it happens to be pretty close to this black hole. And tell us, will you pronounce the name of the black hole?
Yeah, they give it a name called the Turi, the
Yeah.
Turi. Yeah. And yeah, can you imagine, right? Humanity going, hey, we're going to go to an alternate place to live now. Oh, yeah, there's a black hole in the backyard.
Yes. Yeah,
And so there's a
exactly.
little bit in the story about, well, why would they go there of all places, right?
Right.
And so a little bit of, backstory. Um, One thing that I'll just mention, because the premise is so dark, people like, all right, is this appropriate for people? And I definitely try to, it's for adults, but I definitely wrote it to be, for mature teens, like they could handle
Yeah.
the content because there are some things I don't do any, graphic stuff, graphic sex or violence, even the wartime violence that's in there is usually seen at a distance,
Hmm.
or through kind of a fuzzy lens, if you will. Um,
Yeah. I
because I
think
don't
it's
want that
very
to compete with the
effective.
story.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
As I was reading some of those more intense action scenes where there's fighting, I mean, essentially there is a lot of combat, even one-on-one. And the dog fights are really fun with the fighter jets and I got that sense as I was reading that it was this PG-13, if you will. Definitely something I wouldn't necessarily have my 7-year-old read, even though he loves reading. He loves it. And one day, probably when he's around 13 or 14, depending on his own maturity, I probably would let him read it. But yeah, it's a little advanced and a little bit mature for any I would say what you just said under that age. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not for middle grade unless they're,
Yeah.
pretty rooted and grounded, but above that age, my
Yeah.
intent when I started writing, actually, Bria, I wanted to write stories that my daughter, who was then about 13 and 14 or 14, that she could read. That was
Yeah.
my inspiration to start writing. And
Hmm.
so, I had that in the back of my mind in terms of what were my boundaries as a writer. And I know there's
Hmm.
other people have other boundaries, and that's what's for them, whether tighter or looser. But I wanted to keep this at a level that I thought, at least even if it's not targeted there, either by length or by theme, that
Sure.
it would be
Yeah.
okay for discerning parents to say, hey, yeah, they could take a look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you mention we've got a few minutes left. Would you mention what would you say was maybe your favorite part to write? Sometimes people talk about that slog in the middle. Maybe that wasn't a slog for you, or maybe you loved writing the ending or the opening. What would you say was one of your favorite parts to actually write?
Oh boy, that's like picking your favorite child.
Right?
Um,
Yeah, it's some simple questions.
Yeah, yeah. Everything has its own purpose. So, like the beginning, introducing the characters and the stakes, and that was fun because I'm discovering some of these characters along the way. I mean, I had an idea about who they were, but that is the fun part, discovering who they are and really finding what their own voice. Because
Hmm.
this book is written in three different voices. You've mentioned
Right.
the
Yes.
father-daughter, Bard and Lana, but there's also this potential human sacrifice that shows up and changes the game, and
Yes.
she's a
Yeah,
fun character.
she is.
And so
How do you
getting
pronounce her name? Ma-
Mazia, it's kind of like
Maisie.
it's
That's
like maize, like the corn, but Mazia,
yeah.
and
Okay.
so she was just a kind of a hoot to discover because she's is she always what she seems what she seems,
Yeah.
and so that was fun at the beginning. Uh, I was very intentional. There would be no slog in the middle, right? So a lot of the action, the flying action and things that are pretty intense there is in the middle of the book. Um, but if I had to point somewhere, and of course I can't put any spoilers here, I would say
Sure. Yeah.
writing the end of the book, including the very last sentence of the book,
Mm, yeah.
was my favorite, um, because it brought to the surface all the things that have been boiling and these
Hmm.
themes of who am I now, right? Who am I now? I used to be that kind of person, but now I can be a different kind of person. And how does that show up in my relationships, in particular? And what
Hmm.
choices do I make? Um, or what is my understanding of where does God fit in my even understanding? Is there even such a thing? And so there's a lot of things that get sort of tied up at the end. And while this story is planned to continue,
Uh-huh.
it does have enough closure to kind of tie a bow and make it a complete, not like a cliffhanger, like, oh my gosh, come
Yeah.
on, Dan, don't do this to me. Yes,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
definitely, there's a great closure at the end. And that was just really fun to discover actually how that ending was going to turn out.
And so how would you say faith played a role for you? So having read the book, I know my thoughts on it, but I want to hear what role did f your faith play in writing this novel?
Good question. And I'm not one who wants to make this some sort of a Bible lesson or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I just have this premise that God is in the universe, and so when I write, whether it's this story or others, whether God is really on the stage or he's sort of off stage, that at least he exists.
Mm,
Which when I grew up reading some classic sci-fi, he wasn't even part of the picture, or he was put into some other words, or even um, not very helpful language about God. Let's put it that way.
hmm.
So in this story, there is God peeking up into the
Hmm.
story, um, and but it's not like God in the story makes everything turn out right, right? There,
Hmm.
it's like there's that element, and I
Yeah.
just want it to be organic. That it's because it fits the characterization, not because I've got to have a lesson, right? That I want to
Yeah.
pound home. So I think it just fit the characters' journeys because this is a world where faith isn't totally non-existent. It's just sort of been buried by history for a while. And it's one of those kind
Yeah.
of stories where some of that is getting rediscovered. There's always been a remnant of it, but it's sort of starting to get rediscovered in light of this kind of horrible regime that would even do such a thing as send out somebody to be the guy who throws human sacrifices into a hole.
Yeah, and you do have quite the villain, I will say. And there's obviously more than one. There's more than one villain. There is a mole. I'm not going to spoil anything, but like it's I this story is the kind that just has it all. I enjoyed it so much. So where can people follow you? Get on Kickstarter? What's the best way for those watching who are like, I'm ready to jump on there and get signed up for the Kickstarter or visit your website? How can they find you?
Yeah, so if you go to sci-fi pilot.com, that's the best way, sort of your entry door. And there's actually a pop-up that can take you to the Kickstarter while the
Hmm.
Kickstarter's still running. So that would be maybe your one-stop shopping, sci-fi pilot.com. I'm
Hmm.
also on Instagram, although I'm not as great at that.
Hmm.
Sci-fi pilot author is the Instagram handle. So you can follow me there. And you can always contact me. I always love to get questions, connections from readers. So
Hmm.
there's a contact page on my website at scifipilot.com. Feel free to shoot me a note. Or if you got questions about this whole Kickstarter thing,
Hmm.
you can always contact me. So yeah, love to interact, love to take questions, or even for readers to help shape what I write next. So that's always fun.
Awesome. And final question, how, when you're writing these dog fighting scenes, I mean, it is like the action is so well done in this book. What were some of the things you were thinking? I know you obviously have experience. So how did that experience tie into writing? Obviously, you're writing from these different perspectives, from Bard, Alana, Mazia. Um, so each character, whether they're riding, yeah, flying, how did you manage to juggle that kind
Hmm.
of different perspectives with your own experience bringing to the table?
Well, the one thing I did not want to do was to overwhelm the reader with jargon and
Mm.
things, right? So
Hmm.
assume the reader
Because
knows,
you know the jargon. So
right.
yeah.
I mean, you use the jargon to make it, to bring life, breathe life into the story, not to confuse the reader. And so, I have sketches where I'm sketching out how the dogfights go, and I literally had a little notes, okay, how to make this simple, right?
Mm,
Because the actual job of being a fighter pilot has a lot of complexity and things
I'm
to it,
sure. Yeah, I can
um,
imagine.
that Hollywood doesn't, do justice to.
Hmm.
So it was
Hmm.
how to keep it simple, but also it's really about the characters, right? Um, and one of the unique elements of the book is, well, you've got, father and daughter going to combat together. Again, that's not a
Yeah.
big spoiler. Um, so just trying to imagine, even as a father, what would it be like to be in combat with my daughter, with me?
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
something that I wanted to make sure to pull that thread about that dynamic between
Hmm.
characters when literally, death is on the line. And how would I feel as a dad if I brought my daughter into combat?
Oh, yeah. And there's a
Yeah.
wonderful thread of tension with that. I mean, that's something I know a lot of writers strive for is just that increasing tension with those types of relationships. And it's so well done here. Thank you, Dan, for coming on to the Sci-Fi and Sunshine podcast. I cannot wait to get your book in actual print. I had the honor of reading the Kindle version ahead of this podcast, but I'm very excited to actually hold it in my hand when the Kickstarter is all done. So thank you again, and we will definitely probably have you back when you've got the sequel going.
Thanks so much, Bria. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for supporting sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's a
Oh,
great community.
absolutely. I also love it all, so it's been great. But thank you, and bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. As you venture through this sci-fi world we all find ourselves living in, may you be the sunshine to the people around you today. Adios.